you would have heard the term NIMBY, not in my backyard. Many of my listeners ring me up and complain to me every now and then that all I ever do is not in my backyard stories. Whingers, complainers and more. Usually it's landowners, residents, people who are worried about the value of their property or house protesting about a project in their area. People worried about losing the amenity and the feel of their suburb, the thing that made them want to live there in the first place. So this morning, let's invert the whole thing and say hello to the Yimbys. Yes, in my backyard. Do they exist? And what do they have to say about development? Well, my guest in the studio is Natalie Rayment, co-founder of Yimby Queensland. Natalie, I am intrigued. Hello.
Hello, thanks for having me.
What does Yimby stand for?
Yes, in my backyard.
Tell me the story. I have to know the story to this.
Okay, well, it's an initiative for exactly that reason, to counter the NIMBY stereotype that's so commonplace when we're talking about development in our cities, despite the demand for housing, the jobs it creates, and the lifestyle precincts, the benefits that development can bring to us. So that's exactly what it is. It's an initiative to discuss, recognise and promote good development that enhances our everyday lives.
Do you have any sympathy for NIMBYs?
Look, I completely understand that development can be scary, it's going to potentially change an area, but I think we need to look more broadly and balance that conversation.
So what does a good development of sorts look like? What are the essentials for any good, inverted commas, development?
Yeah, so good development might mean different things in different places, but I think it's one way to look at it is, does that development bring some community dividend? Does it bring benefit to the community? Does it have some design excellence, an architectural icon? Is it something that's sustainable, is going to still be great for our cities in the future? So sustainability and innovative development would be good.
So sustainability and innovation is what you regard as a good development.
Yeah, and development that brings positives to our communities. The things we come to expect, like new parks and plazas, artwork, some of those things that we don't talk about as often when we're talking about development.
Okay. I am, for all intents and purposes, a tree hugger. I love trees. Big, shade-providing, wind, atmosphere cooling trees. I just love them. And any single tree I see cut down, I really hate it. What happens when you want to even build a good development, but people see the trees, the green space, the natural beauty of their suburb, the very thing that attracted them there in the first place, being removed?
Well, that's definitely one of the things we look at when we're looking at a new development project, whether there's something so significant that needs to be protected, or is it an opportunity for development to bring new people into a suburb and then provide a landscaping plan that's going to provide new planting and new landscape and new green spaces to that development.
Should developments always have an element of green space in them, no matter what?
Look, I think the majority of developments do, and I can't really think of an example where you wouldn't. Even in an industrial estate, there's always going to be landscaping around the perimeter or in a lunch space. Yeah.
What troubles me is that they often tend to put sort of pine bark down and stick a couple of token trees in there and say, look at that, it's landscaped. That's not what I call it.
There's some amazing landscapes.
It's concrete-scaped in my mind.
Well, it depends on the scale of the project, I guess, and what that landscape budget is, but there's certainly some pretty iconic landscapes being proposed. I think Howard Smith Wharves is one of the new projects in the inner city. It's talking about providing an edible landscape, so it's going to grow. Is part of their landscape concept is to grow food for the restaurants.
Okay, tell me about that, because that was my next question. What does a good development look like in this city? Give me some examples. So tell me a bit more about. So this is the Howard Smith Wharves on the Brisbane River, over that what I would call hyper expensive Tenerife Newstead area.
That's right. So it's down on the river frontage. It's underneath the Story Bridge. Essentially, it's a bit of a lost space in the city, but it is at the end of the New Farm River Walk, and it connects then through to the city. So it's an opportunity to revitalise that space, bring back a little bit of lost Brisbane with some iconic architecture. It's got some hotels. It's got some reuse of all the heritage buildings and wharves there, turning them into restaurants and craft brewery, some cafes, and then regenerating that open space, landscape that open space. And the landscape theme, which I love, is edible landscape, or the urban agriculture, and it's growing the food for the restaurants.
I love that, yeah. And I love the idea of bees being placed on buildings or hives on top of buildings in the city. But they're rare in my mind, and that space there. There's not many, old Queenslanders along. There's none, is there? There's no sort of established houses there, so you can do something with it.
Sure.
And that's not what's happening with most of the developments in this city. They're going in people's suburbs.
Yeah. So most development that's happening in Brisbane is infill development. It's right there in the suburbs. I think. The concept with the new planning scheme in Brisbane is about bringing density on your main transport routes and in centres, places that are walkable to the city, but definitely development is all shapes and sizes.
My guest is Natalie Rayment. She's co-founder of Yimby, Yes in My Backyard. Give me another example of a good development that you know of in this city, something that we can look to and say, okay, well, if I want a development and I can't stop it, how can I pressure the developers or the council to say, okay, it's got to look a bit like that, it's got to have these elements to it?
Yeah. So I guess moving out of the CBD, one example that springs to mind is at Carindale. It's Astonbrook. It's a residential subdivision that's happened in Carindale. And when you looked at that site to begin with, it had a waterway going through it. So that's a value, and that's something that the community wants to retain and protect. But that waterway was very overgrown. It was weed infested, and through the course of the development, they actually found an ornate rainbow fish that was quite rare, and that needed to be protected. So, that development actually has to respect the waterway, step back from the waterway, improve the waterway, regenerate it with planting, and now the development is finished. The residential subdivision's finished. The landscape's still being maintained and protected. The wallabies are coming back through that urban waterway in the middle of Brisbane. It's quite amazing.
Now you're actually with a property planner or something like that, aren't you? You're with a planning company yourself.
Yes, that's right. I'm a town planner by background and practicing in Brisbane.
Okay, so and you guys are sort of behind the setting up of Yimby.
That's right. So Walter Consulting Group, which is where I work, they've funded the incubation of Yimby, and funded me to head over to Boulder in America to be at the first World Yimby Conference to hear about what other groups are doing around the world.
There's a Yimby conference?
Absolutely.
There's a World Yimby Conference?
It's a growing phenomena across the globe. Yes.
So you're going over there to Boulder, Colorado, to meet other sort of consultants and planners and say, how do we build good developments, ones that people like?
That's exactly it. I've already been. It was earlier in the year, and it wasn't just planners and developers. It was community activists. It was the environmental movement that likes density in the right locations next to transport. It was social housing providers. It was the transport lobby. It's a diverse group, all there saying, let's support good development in the right locations.
Okay, so your company, or the company you're associated with, is putting up the funds for the Yimby group here.
That's right. That's the incubation of it, but we're trying to grow that group, get the word out, bring like-minded people together so that it can stand on its own 2 feet.
I guess what I'm trying to determine is if Yimby is just another sort of a front for another, mega cashed-up property developer who wants to sort of, concrete every bit of green space in Brisbane.
No, that's right. So that's not what it is. We want it to grow, and it's certainly gaining momentum, but we want it to be able to stand alone.
So if people have got a development coming in their area, how do they let developers and planners know what they want? How much green space, how much public open space do they want? How much of a playground they want? I've seen a couple of sort of what I call adventure playgrounds for kids that I'm looking at and go, why didn't I get that in my area? In other words, somewhere where my kid can play, run, and really explore.
Yeah. So there's certainly an opportunity to engage about developments, whether it's before the development happens, during the development application, and I guess what we're saying is let's balance up that conversation and don't just get interested if you don't like the development and talk about what you don't like about it, but actually talk about what you do like or what you would like to see, and make sure that we're having that balanced conversation. understand that development is going to happen in a city that's growing, and let's talk about what we want, what's going to be good about that development.
Developers have to, by law, put public notices out, don't they, saying, we've got an application to develop this site. Do developers hate that moment when they put the public ad in the paper or on the web or on a fence somewhere?
Look, it's always interesting to see what sort of submissions come back. Absolutely, not every application.
Like what? Tell me a story.
Well, I think that they're just so varied. Some people will, raise the history. It's really quite interesting about what's happened in their community, and they want to protect that, and that's a valid thing to raise. And it's always interesting for our clients to be able to hear and understand that. But very often, probably 99% of submissions are negative, and they don't. I guess the thing that's interesting to me is that there's perhaps a silent majority out there that aren't making submissions because, you go to that effort. If you've got a problem, you don't necessarily talk about the good things. So we want to make that easier. We want to, create a voice for the people that like development and to highlight what is good about that development or what they would like to see in a positive sense.
My guest is Natalie Rayment. She's co-founder of Yimby, Yes in My Backyard. She's got a quarter of a century of experience in town planning in both public and private sector in Brisbane. She is a director of the Walter Consulting Group and is a manager of planning. Do Yimbys, your mob, intend to sort of engage with NIMBYs and say, guys, we think you're wrong about this development, or help us make it better?
Yeah, I think it's not about picking fights. We certainly don't want to pick fights with the NIMBY, but we want to have that conversation. I mean, quite often we hear what people don't like about development, and often those people don't really understand some of the positives. So we want to engage, talk about both sides, talk about what's good and what's bad about a development proposal, and get people thinking about what they would like to see.
Are you prepared to nominate any developments that you think are not good developments in Brisbane?
Look, I don't think I'll go to the specifics, but I understand that developments don't always hit the mark, and we need to learn from those. Look, there's probably examples out there, and I think it's potentially a bit subjective. People might not like that development if it happens next door to them, or if it is on a prominent location that stands out and it's not what they expected in that location. But I think it's about learning from those things and moving forward.
Let me take a quick call. A listener's phoned up. Vinay. Vinay, you've got a question. Hi.
Oh, yeah, I do. Interesting conversation. And I understand that, every growing city, which Brisbane is one of, does need to continue its development. But the question I'm interested in is, do you look at public transport and facilities for the residents to actually get out of the suburb before you actually plan the development? Because and again, I'm talking in particular of the Upper Kedron and the Gap area, and I must confess I live in this area. But if with the amount of development happening here, and they are working on grounds, picnic grounds, playgrounds, but when you look at how this population is going to move out of this place and to work in the morning, it's a complete roadblock.
What's the main road out of there? I forget the name of the main road, Vinay.
Well, Waterworks Road and Sanford Road.
That's right.
Yep. Sanford Road is just a laugh in the morning, and the Ferny Grove train station. I mean, if you don't get there by 6:30, you don't have a place to park. And this is a train station that has recently been upgraded. I mean,
I take your point. You summed it up pretty well. Something I haven't asked you is the public transport question. He's talking about the Cedar Grove development up at Upper Kedron. A very large. It's been reduced now by the state government, but a very large number of houses. And this question comes up a lot about how you physically get people who are maybe buying these new houses in the development, how you get them in and out of the area. So do they consider public transport before the development goes ahead?
Absolutely, and I guess even before the development goes ahead, the government, when they're creating plans for areas, they look at that, and certainly, there's a focus for density along those public transport routes, and particularly around public transport hubs. So that's where you see more of the infill high-rise developments going on around those public transport hubs so that you can walk to the station.
I assume that would be a good development, wouldn't it? That would meet your criteria of what's a good development.
Absolutely.
Something that people can get into and out of easily, freedom of movement.
Connectivity. Walkability, that's exactly it.
So if it doesn't have that, it's not a good development.
Well, I think we've got to look at what the development is that's being proposed. So if it's not a high-rise development, we still need choice in housing, we still need low-rise, we need new residential lots, and they're not going to all be around a railway station. They're not going to all be in walking distance of the station. So it's about getting that density right, and then also getting the numbers, getting the population there so that bus routes can service those new areas.
You got a view on the Upper Kedron development, the Cedar Woods development?
Look, I'm aware of it. I think that transport certainly has been one of the biggest issues out there, and there's plenty of traffic engineers who are far more qualified than I am to talk about the traffic solutions. But I think they've analysed those roads and intersections and opportunities to get people to and from the station very heavily.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Natalie Rayment, co-founder of Yimby. Yes, in my backyard.